Hello, and welcome to the Crimson Misery podcast, a podcast about men's and women's college hoops. It is November 13th, 2024. My name is Will Rainbolt. I will be your host throughout this entire journey. And so far, this is just a one-man battalion. I am recording, editing, and distributing this podcast all by myself. So if you like what you hear and you want to see more from me, then please consider giving me a subscription on YouTube and giving me 5 stars on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And hopefully, within due time, the podcast will appear on whatever platform you use to stream. I'm still working on that, of course. So I do ask for a little bit of patience there. But other than that, this is basically the opening day syllabus for the class in like a college lecture. And basically you're going to be hearing what this podcast is about, what you should be expecting, and first and foremost, who I am, because who are you hearing talking right now? So again, as I said, I'm Will Rainbolt. I am a graduate of Indiana University. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in sports media, so I'm automatically able to talk about whatever I want to talk about because I have a college degree. So, but all jokes aside, no, I've always been a really big fan of sports and college basketball, and I felt like this would be a great way to offer up my analysis and commentary and a lot of critiques as well about the college athletics landscape. I also would like to talk about way more than just that. So obviously, whenever any other events end up happening in the sports world, or even in the world in general, I will be definitely talking about that. So I would definitely prepare yourself for that. It won't just be about college hoops, even though this technically is like a college basketball podcast. So anyway, with the title of the podcast and the pictures of both Victor Oladipo and Tom Crean, and also for Sister Jean for whatever reason, I don't know. I just decided to select that, but you might think this is an Indiana-centric podcast, which yes, it is. It's the team I'm a fan of, so I'm gonna provide as much commentary on Indiana as possible. But no, in all seriousness, I will be talking about every team. I want to be able to talk about teams that potential audience members are fans of or are students their respective universities, and not just be like an Indiana or Big Ten centric podcast. This is an opportunity for me to learn a lot more, to be able to flex my knowledge muscles on college basketball. So basically that's going to be what you should be expecting, and also a lot more than just recapping or different ounces of commentary. I also want to do like fun episodes, like remember that guy, remember that girl who played for a specific university and who had like you know really niche college basketball games, like Brandon Paul for Illinois dropping, I think it was like 43 on Ohio State back in 2012. Just stuff like that. And hopefully with a due time that'll happen. And also stuff like worst ofs and best ofs, remember this specific game, and like basically all of that. And also just do like fun facts episodes like they do on podcasts like Effectively Wild, which is a baseball podcast. I very much recommend that show if you are interested in any MLB related stuff. But as of right now, this is basically where I am right now. I want to be able to talk about basically anything college basketball related, and also just basically be on a specific track to cultivate an audience. I want you all to offer up suggestions for me. I want to be receptive to any ideas that you all may have, building camaraderie and a community that has a lot of respect for college basketball. Also can offer up a lot of information, and I feel like that's a pretty beautiful thing. So within due time, currently there are no membership options for my podcast, or I mean, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. But if it gets to the point where people start listening, and I build up a good enough audience, let me know if that's something you all want. I definitely feel like that's something I'll do, and within due time, I think that will end up being something that I should be able to do for you all if you want to support the show that way. So with that being said, we do have some action, some brief recapping. Again, this isn't going to be a long episode by any means, but you do have the Champions Classic in Atlanta, Georgia. That's where I am currently based. I'm originally from Indiana. That's why, I went to IU and everything, but I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And I didn't end up going to that game, but any of those games, the two games last night, Michigan State, Kansas, and then Duke and Kentucky, quite the dichotomy of games. I really don't like seeing a lack of foul fest or a ref show in this case, where Kansas just seemingly got away with so much, but they're also just so good that it probably wouldn't even have mattered. Um, Michigan State just looks very stagnant. I know Carson Cooper and Jackson Kohler had some pretty good games, and I think that Michigan State will be fine. I think they're currently, at least how I would say, they're in like the mid tier of the Big Ten Conference. I think they do have potential to climb a little bit higher than that. But again, facing Kansas in a neutral site is very difficult. And Kansas, I also just think, is, for the second year in a row, just kind of overrated. And I hope that that turns out to be true. And because I really do not like Bill Self, and it just really was not enjoyable to see the just lack of foul calls on Kansas, where it was clearly, Michigan State driving in and they get smacked by a Kansas player and nothing would be called. But on the other hand, you had Duke and Kentucky last night, which more than made up for it. Both Duke and Kentucky look fantastic. And this was Kentucky's first game with Mark Pope as head coach. And I got to tell you, really, you can, if for any Kentucky haters out there, and again, I don't like Kentucky, I will always root against Kentucky, but they are so much more likable without John Calipari. Oh my God. And it just is more aesthetically pleasing to watch than John Calipari's whatever offense he tried to run last year that was very hit or miss. This offense was just so much more compact and so much more free flowing in a way that didn't make you question whether or not they were going to like flame out in the NCAA tournament, which they did last year. But again, Kentucky ends up winning this game against a very freshman laden Duke team, a very talented team. I mean, Cooper Flag, number one overall pick potentially in the NBA draft, he went off in a losing effort. But again, this is a November game. This is very early on in the college basketball season. Even though you love to get a win like this early on, it's really not gonna matter too much in terms of what happens in January and February and March. So again, but this is still a great momentum win for Kentucky, and especially in the Mark Pope era, that's gonna be something that really propels them forward. And so, again, with Lamont Butler and Kerr Kriisa and all those guys, just really, building a team up from the transfer portal is something that, especially in the age of NIL, is just something that we're going to be seeing way more. And I think this is going to really work out for a lot of other teams too that decide to go this route. So, with that being said, again, this isn't just going to be a men's basketball podcast, even though I just talked about men's basketball. But I will, within the next couple episodes, talk about women's basketball a lot more. It does hurt that Indiana lost to Harvard at home, which kind of sucks. But we'll be talking about way more. Obviously the dominance of South Carolina, the emergence of Silas Swords at Michigan, who went off against South Carolina. Great start to a college basketball career. The ever growing power and great play of Juju Watkins at USC. That team is just so good. And hating on Kim Mulkey, probably. That's gonna be, another another great thing. Hopefully, more losses will pile up for her. Because yeah, I screw Kim Mulkey so much, man. All right, but with that being said, this was just basically an introduction episode for you all. I hope that within due time, you all will, I will gain more followers, gain more subscribers on this podcast. Again, if you have any suggestions, you can email me at crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Will AJ Rainbolt. I'm also on Blue Sky if you have that. I hope to migrate a little bit more toward there. I will not be calling Twitter X, just saying. And you can also follow the podcast on Twitter at Crim Misery Podcast. Yeah, I know it wouldn't let me put in Crimson Misery Podcast, but with that being said, thank you all so much for listening to the debut episode, episode 0 of the Crimson Misery podcast. Again, this is just a one-man show, so please, I do ask for some patience. But in the meantime, hopefully more episodes will come out soon. I am aiming for 2 to 3 episodes a week. Starting next week, I may have another episode out this week or this weekend, depending on what happens. Obviously, Indiana football not playing this weekend because they're on a bye week, but that has just been a amazing story with Kurt Signetti, Curtis O'Rourke, all those guys, just re-energizing the program for a 10-0 record and the number 5 ranking in college football, which is just beyond where I thought this season could ever go. So I'm so happy with that. Um, Yeah, I guess one final thing I'll mention. I know this is a very difficult time for a lot of people, especially with the election happening and everything. So, obviously, if you want a bit of a sanctuary from that, I guess this can be a place where I can offer you. But a little forewarning, I do tend to get very political with some things. So, just a fair warning there. And I do ask that you all respect that. So, I mean, I don't shy away from getting political. So please just keep that in the back of your mind. But with that said, I think that is all I wanted to discuss with you all on this debut episode. So again, has been the Crimson Misery podcast. Thank you all so much for listening, and please consider again giving me a subscription on YouTube, 5 stars on Spotify, etc. Follow me on Twitter if you would like, and then yeah. So please take care of yourself. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again. Just wanted to offer up a correction. It is at Crim Misery Pod on Twitter. I should have looked at my own logo that I had, but yeah, that's just something I wanted to make sure to correct. So again, take care, y'all.